How's it going, guys? It's your boy Pride here, and today we're going to be talking about Quincy's, the based history of Quincy's, and what sets a Quincy apart from everybody else in the Bleach universe. It's going to be a pretty simple video. More complex ones will be on the way, because there are some Quincy's that you gotta go in depth about because their powers are a little wild. But that's for the future. That's for the future. Well, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you do. If you're new here, subscribe. I appreciate each and every one of you. And let's get into it. Now, when we're talking about what is a Quincy, first we should understand the definition of Quincy. Quincy pretty much translates into Monk of Destruction. It's a pretty fitting name because Quincy's main goal, their main thing, is they destroy hollows utterly and completely, body and soul. It's their whole thing. They are destruction. So Monk of Destruction fits them pretty perfectly. Now you might be asking, well, how do they destroy hollows so perfectly? Well, it's because Quincy's are different compared to everybody else. You see, to be categorized as a Quincy, you have to be a human who's able to absorb and manipulate reishi into spiritual weapons. Now, reishi is pretty much the spiritual energy in the environment. That's pretty much what reishi is. So a Quincy is able to manipulate the energies around them. That's pretty much what that means. And when they manipulate that energy, most of them use that said energy to create spirit weapons. Now again, Quincy's are human. They do this because they don't have a crazy amount of spiritual pressure in their bodies. They have a good amount for humans, but nothing on the terms of a Shimigami. Before we get into the hated feud between a Quincy, a Shimigami, and obviously the Hollows, you have to know that there are two types of Quincy's, technically three, and I get to why technically in a second. Just a side note, I'm not gonna say their legitimate names because, well, it's in a language that I'm not well versed in, and I don't feel like messing it up too badly. We got purebloods and we got mixed breeds. That's pretty much all we need to know. Thing with mixed breeds are, all Quincy's usually have the same power sets. However, mixed breeds have to train certain abilities in order to obtain them, while pure-blooded Quincy's can get it naturally from birth. And we'll get more into which abilities can a Quincy manipulate based on their blood type later on. Now, there's also a third type of a Quincy, except they can be either pure blood or mixed breed. And this third type of Quincy is a Quincy who can share their power instead of absorbing the natural reishi within the area. As I said, most Quincy's can absorb the energy. However, there are a select few that cannot. But instead of absorbing energy, they are able to give their energy, their own personal energy, onto other people. And they can still learn how to manipulate the energy around them. It just doesn't come as easy. They just can't absorb it. Now, I know what you're thinking. These Quincy's might have trouble keeping up with the rest, but actually, after they give out their power to other Quincy's or people, they can take it back, and that will allow them to get stronger. For while they gave their energy away, the stronger that person gets with said energy in them, once they take it back, they get all that growth also, and they are able to absorb that and harness it. So now that we know what a Quincy is, let's go into their history a little bit. Find out, how they got to where they are. Way back when, Quincy's have always been killing hollows. Now, it didn't used to be a huge problem until the Quincy started to reproduce a lot more and kind of outpacing the Shimigami in that regard. Now, increasing the numbers of Quincy's by itself wouldn't be a bad thing. It's just that their activities led them to being bad. Remember when I said that they destroyed hollows utterly, soul and body? Well, apparently that is a bad thing for the Soul Society and in the Shimigami's eyes. For the Shimigami have a role in keeping the balance of all souls. They pretty much dictate where the souls should go once they die, Soul Reapers. And when you kill a hollow, a Shimigami will transform that hollow soul, purify it, and send it to the Soul Society. There go, making pretty much the cycle of death, whole. Goes to the Soul Society, more souls show up in the human world, they get turned to hollows, purify the hollows, send them to the Soul Society. The Quincy's disrupted that order, for they, again, destroyed the souls of the hollows, which was a bad thing because apparently when there's an imbalance of souls in one place or another, aka there's an imbalance of souls in the Soul Society or imbalance of souls in the human world, that can cause the collapse of all worlds. pretty much bringing the worlds into chaos. And as the Quincy's numbers multiplied, the cycle of souls became more and more unstable, forcing the Shimigami to enact a war so that way they can bring balance back into the world, because the Quincy's didn't really want to stop killing hollows the way they were killing them. And the person that led the war against the Soul Society, aka the Soul Reapers, and who was the leader and quote unquote the father of the Quincy's, was Yuhabaha. He actually wanted the collapse of all worlds, so he actually pushed for the agenda for the hollows to be eradicated in that way. Again, the Shimigami was not for that, so they had a fight. The Quincy's lost, and the Quincy's numbers dwindled quite a bit. Hundreds of years passed, and conflicts of here and there happened. Yuhabak got sealed away, only to come back way later, but that's a story for another day. And the Quincy's were living their lives to the best that they can. However, they were still killing hollows a little too much. And so, 200 years before the first episode of Bleach even started, the Quincy's were almost completely eradicated. So that's pretty much the history of the Quincy's. They got into a big fight with the Soul Reapers, for they kept on annihilating the souls instead of purifying the souls, bringing an imbalance to the worlds. And the Quincy's were, besides the hollows, a threat to all humanity. All right, now that we got the history out of the way, it's time to move on to the last couple of things, which is their powers, their general powers, and the weaknesses that all Quincy's share. But real quick, before I get into that, I forgot to go over one thing, and that is a simple thing, really, the dress code of the Quincy's. Usually they wear simple white tunics, that are form-fitting. Also, along their clothing, somewhere there's some type of cross, like a religious cross. So that's how some people are able to identify a Quincy, especially in Bleach, is if a Quincy shows up and they're wearing some form of a tunic or some type of uniform, white uniform, and they're able to control Reishi, then that is 9 times out of 10, that is the Quincy. The one time is someone dressing up like a Quincy. That's pretty much how that is. So now moving on to the general powers that Quincy's have. We already established that they can control Reishi, manipulate the energy around them, and make spiritual weapons out of it. Most Quincy's will form their spiritual weapon into bows and arrows, for that is almost the best fighting style for them, because they're still human. They're not like Soul Reapers who can just get out there and just, fight with the power of their soul and have Zanpakutos that can Bankai. No, they're still people. They still rely on energy around them and the little bit that they have inside of them. So close combat is not their go-to most of the time, because they can get dangerously hurt. Their form of fighting is usually archery. It gives them the advantage on offense and defense, and they can fight multiple enemies at the same time, where they can just launch multiple arrows with one shot. Another thing that most Quincy's would like to use is they store their energy in something called a Gento, which is pretty much a small capsule that can store their energy and allows them to perform their Quincy spells. There's multiple different applications for this, and we're not going to get too much into it, but pretty much it helps them become spellcasters. A Gento is kind of like their spell focus. If you know what D&D is, you know what a spell focus is. It lets them be kind of like half casters. Moving on to the next thing, they have a movement technique called Pure Flying Stealth, or Hirenkaiku. I might have butchered that name, but it's an advanced Quincy movement technique that allows the user to move at high speeds by riding on the flow of Reishi created below their feet. Next we have Blut, or translated into blood dress. It's an ability that allows a Quincy to use the flowing Reishi around them and put it directly into their blood vessels, which can increase their attack and defense drastically. However, even though this is a very powerful technique, it has one major flaw. You can't do both at the same time. You have to pick and choose. You can either do attack or you can do defense. You can't have both. And as I said earlier, this is something that a mixed breed Quincy has to train in order to get, while pure-blooded Quincy's can obtain it naturally and use it pretty easily. Another ability that Quincy's could possibly possess is Shadow. Shadow is an ability that allows a Quincy to teleport him or his other allies to another dimension, or even someone's own inner world, aka like where the Zanpakutos usually reside. You see Zangetsu do the same thing for Ichigo when Ichigo is asking for help. He uses Shadow to teleport Ichigo away. Shadow seems to be an ability that requires a lot of dedication, For not a lot of Quincy's use this ability, even though it's very handy. But obviously, again, it's the power to teleport in between dimensions, aka Soul Society or maybe Waco Mundo or even to the human world. You know, it's a very strong ability. I'm going to assume that there are like specialists that are dedicated to learning this one ability so that way everybody else can focus on learning different things. Now, the next few abilities are going to be a Quincy's trump card or a desperate move. Abilities that are for very tough situations, and these abilities are kind of made to aid a Quincy to survive it. And we're going to be starting with Ranso Tengai. It's a high level technique that allows a Quincy to use their own spirit energy in their body, have it be controlled purely by the Quincy's brain in order to make strings that connect to the rest of the body. That way the body can be controlled as if it was a puppet. Basically, it turns you into your own puppet. This ability is usually used for when a Quincy might have their body impaired or not working properly, as in with paralysis, broken limbs, or anything else that could impede somebody's movement. This ability was originally created for elderly Quincy's so that way they can still stay in the fight even though their bodies didn't move the way it used to anymore. This is mainly what this ability was used for. The next ability is going to be called Quincy's Final Form. It is usually the last resort of a Quincy for it. This is a pretty much do or die move, risk it all for victory. In order to use this technique, you have to break your own Sunray glove. Breaking of this Sunray glove gives the Quincy tremendous power, but at the price of losing their power when the transformation is all said and done. It is pretty much the Quincy version of Mungetsu, the final Getsugan Tetsu. That's pretty much what this ability entails. Once you use the power, you can never use your Quincy powers again. A pretty huge drawback is kind of the end of a career for most Quincy's, so it's not widely acceptable, and the practice kind of died 200 years ago. And instead, they decided to evolve Quincy's final form into another technique, one that didn't have such a huge drawback but gave similar powers. This evolution technique is called Quincy's Holy Form. Now, the reason it's called the Holy Form is because when a Quincy unleashes this technique, their appearance change and they manifest sorta wings and something that's similar to a halo. And they're able to use a lot of strong powers. They're almost as good, if not better, than the Quincy's final form with less drawbacks. The drawbacks being, one, it's very taxing on stamina, meaning you probably can't use it for long unless you have a lot of stamina to burn. Two, Quincy's couldn't use it while they were holding on to stolen Bankais. Three, the last weakness is if you were to break the halo, they would lose all the gain powers that they just got. They won't be out to fight, they will lose the boost of the powers that they just received, though they might be able to still retain the form. Overall, it's a way better ability. Next up, we have the last Quincy technique that all Quincy's could pretty much learn if they're skilled enough, and this technique is called Church Hymn Saint Ward. Basically, it's a very powerful Quincy spell, again, they're spellcasters to a degree, that creates an area of reishi shaped with countless Quincy crosses protruding from the ground. We don't really get to see exactly what it does, but I mean, they make it sound pretty good because Roy Lloyd described the spell as the maximum protection among the Quincy techniques of offense and defense, and that it will strike dead anybody that touches it. So, assumingly, if you're in the area on impact, if you touch it with your own weapon or your own body, you might just instant die. Who knows? They make it sound like it's amazing though. Probably has a lot of setup and a lot of work to do. No one really actually set this thing off, which is good, I suppose. But that is it for the abilities. Next and finally, we're moving on to the weaknesses. Weakness number one, the Quincy's rely heavily on reishi. Again, it's the spiritual energy in the environment. The more spiritual energy around them, the stronger they are. The less energy around them, the weaker they are. So a battlefield, aka like in the Soul Society or Waco Mundo, is pretty perfect for them. A battlefield in The human world, pretty not great for them. They won't be able to display their full powers or use all of their techniques unless they have a crap ton of Gentos around. Next is the real weakness. The whole reason they started the war, pretty much besides Yuabaha just wanting chaos, and the fact that they just would not stop killing hollows and just exterminating them. Hollows are poisonous to Quincy's, which makes the Quincy's have to pretty much fight in self-defense. For if a hollow were to attack a Quincy and the Quincy didn't fight back and completely annihilate the hollows, then the Quincy's will also go extinct, but they will also be destroyed body and soul. So, what the Quincy's can do to hollows, the hollows can do back to the Quincy's, which makes the Quincy's not like that aspect and kind of initiated everything that led up to the war 1,000 years ago and their extermination 200 years ago in Bleach. So, really, it turns out the Quincy's weren't the bad guys after all. Mostly.